And we're recording. So today is May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, for the Americans that love Mexican culture. And we kind of cherish that day, and it's very fun. And I also cherish North Dakotans. So as I'm trying to help the world know why I'm so committed to North Dakotans, because I'm committed to our people here. And when I run across somebody super interesting, I'm like, I bet most people would not think of this person as a North Dakotan. But that's who it's about today, and that is Naomi Muscha. Naomi, bienvenido. And why don't you go ahead and we know she's a Spanish teacher, but she's got a really, really interesting story that has shaped who she is, and she's shaping her community because of it. So Naomi, tell us about yourself.
Oh, goodness. Well, yes, I'm currently a retired Spanish teacher. I taught in Leonard and Kindred, and then most of my years in Enderlin, which is where my husband and I raised our family. We have 4 children and 15 grandchildren.
What?
They range in age from 22 to twin first graders who are 7.
Wow.
Our children live in Wisconsin, Hawaii, Minnesota, and North Dakota. So as far as a brief summary, that would be it, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't realize you had that many grandchildren.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. That's
keeps life
North
interesting.
Dakota values. Yep. Okay, but so that is, so you're here in North Dakota. You got a great big family that's spread out, some in North Dakota, somewhere else. But the interesting thing is your upbringing, and how that, can you share us about your upbringing and how you ended up here in North Dakota?
Okay. Well, I spent the first 13 years of my life in central Minnesota. And after my 7th grade year, my parents, my younger siblings, and I went to the country of Bolivia. My father, his main duty there, they went with a Lutheran mission that's based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and is still functioning. Yeah. But anyway, his main mission was to build a radio station. And as of last fall, it celebrated its 50th anniversary. So I was only there a year and a half. I ended up coming to North Dakota. Both my parents are from North Dakota. My mother was from the Enderlin area. But because of the limited education in the mid-1960s in the country of Bolivia, there was only one place that I could have gone to high school. And looking back, we made the decision that I was going to come here and live with my grandparents and go to Enderlin High School, which is what I did, and technically never left as far as living residences. So yeah, I've lived in North Dakota since 1968. Okay. But because of that background, it really formed the rest of my life also.
So let's talk. So a couple of things that stick out. So first of all, Lutheran, that's very North Dakotan. They've been always active in working around the world with, and also here in North Dakota. So that is very, very North Dakotan, even though you spent time in Bolivia. And it makes sense that your dad was there. So so you did talk about that missionary work, and that, so and you've done a lot of meaningful missionary work around the world, not just in Bolivia, and carrying on in your upbringing's footsteps. So can you talk about that a little bit more, and how that work shaped your worldview other than speaking Spanish?
Okay, yeah, obviously the Spanish was where that started. I mean, was the country of Bolivia, but oh goodness. As far as different missions, I've been a leader, Guatemala, Mexico. Well, as far as missions, those 2 countries, multiple times to Mexico. I've, in the last few years, gone with one of my son's churches from Minnesota, and that's been to the city of Ensenada, Mexico. Goodness, I'd have to stop and think. See, 5, 6 of my grandchildren have come with, and one of my daughters actually came one year.
Yeah.
And we're part of the group that built a home under what's called Homes of Hope. And what an incredible experience. As far as shape my worldview, when one travels to a country that is so different in many ways from the United States, you learn, well, I believe for one thing, you learn to appreciate the comforts, the blessings that we have in this country.
Oh yeah.
And when you can see firsthand poverty, and I don't dismiss physical and poverty needs that we have in our own country. They're very real, and they exist. But it is at a different level. Many of the other countries in the world do not have the safety nets that we have.
Right.
And it brings the poverty to such an incredible different level. And especially here in the northern states, where it's pretty difficult to live outside on the street,
Right.
when it's 30 below.
Right.
So here in North Dakota, we just don't see so much of what exists outside of our borders. We just are incredibly blessed in this state for multiple reasons. But as far as how it shapes, oh goodness, in multiple ways, I could talk for too long.
Yeah, no, but I know that exact same gratitude that you're feeling, and why you want to keep contributing to that safety net within our own home, and even realizing that some rights we take for granted, but we have them because we're Americans or we're North Dakotans. So like property rights alone, and that's, things like that. You just kind of mind-boggling. So anyway, so that's why. So you did decide, it shaped your world because you became a educator. That's very obvious thumbprint of that foundation. So can you tell us about your career as an educator?
Oh, well, I thoroughly enjoyed it, especially the Spanish classes. I'm not so sure that some of my students maybe learned as much as I wish they would have. And that's not all their fault. It's, how did I approach it? I learned more as I went through it. But I was very privileged to work for schools that supported me in taking students to Mexico. One year we went to Costa Rica, but otherwise it was Mexico. It was a reasonably priced trip through a company out of the Twin Cities area, and went multiple times. And that too was such an experience. And I know the students have often told me afterwards, the best part actually was staying with individual families.
Oh yeah.
So we didn't just go and do a hotel experience, because they said you can do that on your own. So to actually get immersed, even though it was only for a week, but to become immersed in the culture, and each student stayed by themselves with a different family. So
oh wow.
it was a wonderful time. Things that you could bring back, of course, into the classroom, but I also taught some social science classes, and so that helped a little bit in my government experience.
Yeah. That's so great. And I'm sure they it's that, so the whole education is not just learning the words of Spanish. But when a child or yourself gets that context and you really want to communicate with somebody else, then you're like, oh, I wish I spent more time practicing my Spanish. And that's the education, right? That's so it's so great that you did that for them.
That, and also expanding, oh goodness, just multiple physical experiences, because there were a few students that had not been, say, well, even been to Minneapolis or
Right.
uh, been farther west than, well, obviously we didn't go west, but say Bismarck to getting close to the cities. Several of them, that was the extent of their travel. Many had never been on an airplane before.
Yeah,
So,
that's very
you
common.
know, and then
Yeah.
once we had to start getting passports, just all of those things are such life experiences that you don't forget. You
Right.
totally learn from.
Yeah, it's a new freedom, right? It's a new freedom, and that's so great. You gave them that gift. That's a true teacher. So thank you for that. So now I'm going to switch into, now on top of being this amazing international humanitarian, an educator, and a North Dakotan, you were also previously elected as to the legislature. You are one of our elected officials. One of our elected officials, and you're running again, which is really exciting because that's where we can make reality happen, is in the legislature for all North Dakotans. So, so tell us a little bit why you chose to serve. I mean, going up for an election and then being elected, like, why did you do that? Like, that's, that seems out of reach for everybody.
Oh, completely. Actually, my children pretty much all said, Mom is going to run. You know, they could see Dad because of his involvement through the union. uh, to be very honest, initially, I was asked to run. Uh, it was not something that I sought out for myself. It had never been a goal of mine. In teaching government class, obviously it had been an interest.
Right.
And I have to put a plug in for Enderlin High School. For years and years, they have been going, taking the juniors and seniors every year when the legislature is in session.
Mm-hmm.
And there were sometimes that kids, well, I remember bringing a few to the Page for a Day program. So, you know, was I aware of so many things? Yes. And my husband had been involved as state legislative chairman for his union and regional legislative chairman. So it had been part of our lives for years.
Yeah.
But it was not ever something that I thought, oh, I would like to do that someday.
Right.
Not at all. So when I was asked, I'll be very honest, I prayed about it. I pondered it because I thought, oh, I'm not qualified to do something like that. But I decided to say yes, and long story, here I am again.
Yeah.
Never would have guessed this was my journey in life, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it is,
But
and it's been a journey.
yeah.
Very interesting one.
But I just think, well, one, you bring out a couple points about North Dakota. I do think our North Dakotan children are exposed more to civics than like government, than other states that I've lived in. So I must say that North Dakotans are politically more aware from an early age. But the other thing is, you're a better representative when you think about these elected officials. It's really people like you, our teachers, our mothers,
Right.
they are better representative and than, like, just what happens in other states too. So anyway, I think it's really important to pull that out when we talk about running for office in North Dakota. So I'm really glad. So while you were in the legislature, what was your proudest achievement in the legislature?
Wow. Well, I would say two things that happened, and I'm not quite sure I labeled them both as the proudest, but to me they're very much good examples of how in North Dakota, and I pray that it's the same, but how we work together. We weren't what you hear on the national level on how people can't stand each other from the two different parties. we work together, and
Yeah.
you become friends. And the one thing, I know I've told this story to others before, but uh, to me, a super neat example was the fact that one of my foreign exchange students that lived with us, uh, when she went to go home to Columbia, she could not get the Enderlin High School blanket into her luggage. It just didn't
Oh,
fit. Well, it turned out one of the Republican senators had a daughter who was adopting a child from the country of Colombia. And
oh,
I really don't even remember how we started talking about this, but I thought, oh, I'm going to ask, would they by chance bring that blanket to Columbia, and then I'll, do the connecting. Our exchange student was actually going to college here in the United States, but maybe her mother would come because they were going to the same city, the capital. And sure enough, so this blanket from DHS went to Columbia because of a Republican senator's daughter. So just making those connections, obviously it helps, when either side is trying to pass a bill.
yeah.
If you've got personal connections, and there was a bill that I did sponsor, obviously with the help of a couple others, but uh, just interesting. It passed. In fact, pretty much
You act like
unanimously.
you're
I
surprised.
think it had one negative vote in the Senate,
Yeah.
but I received a phone call afterwards from some national, I don't even remember what, saying, how on earth did you get that passed in such a red state? It was a bill that helped pregnant women uh, have a few more accommodations.
Good.
Obviously, we're covered under the Disabilities Act, etc. But this bill would allow for slight, I shouldn't say slight, but more minor accommodations that an employer could give,
Oh,
temporary, but things that in some states women have been fired for.
oh, geez.
And it had great support. And anyway, this phone call was, how did you pass that in North Dakota, for Pete's sakes? And well, there was no magic formula I used. Obviously, it was not something that had been pondered for months and months. So I really believe a lot of it was establishing relationships,
Yep.
and obviously being honest.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I remember telling him, I don't know. I didn't stand to gain from it. I'm a grandmother. I was just level with. Had it been me when I was expecting my twins, I would have needed some accommodation.
Right.
Right, and they're temporary, and not asking for the employer to go to any great length. But anyway, yeah, that was an
I think,
example, but
yeah.
it shows cooperation.
Yeah. Well, I think even I agree 100%. And our politics are different here. When you say it's red, we're not really red. We're North Dakotan. And
Right.
and since you're a language speaker, all you really have to do is speak North Dakotan, and that's practical, and it has
Right.
meaning to your community, and then we get along fine. We speak
Oh,
all the
exactly.
same language in
Right.
politics when it comes to that. So
Oh,
I
totally.
think that's a beautiful example of why it's so great to live in the great state of North Dakota,
Right.
and also to be an elected official, because you really can impact your communities directly.
Oh, yeah.
So we're almost running out of time. So I'm going to end on this last kind of real positive note. So I asked you about your legislative. So what do you like most about being a North Dakotan or raising your family in North Dakota?
Oh, wow. I guess with the traveling that I've done,
Yeah.
I would have to say that we are overall quite accepting and loving of each other. And I don't mean what should I say? Not just a superficial, but we're caring, really, about each other as far as the community. And I know that's not always the case in other large cities or even other states.
Yeah.
And I've seen that play out in my children and even my grandchildren. They love to come to North Dakota. Also, we've been a hunting family, and our grandsons in particular, love to come to North Dakota and
Oh,
hunt
yeah.
and fish.
Yeah.
So it's hard to pinpoint.
It's that feeling, it's hard to describe, but you described it beautiful. And that's why I like to do these stories, because it comes from such a genuine place, and everybody always, you know it, but you have to experience it. And we grow good people because of that, of that caring.
Yes.
So, Naomi, muchas gracias para todo. Thank you for running. Thank you for being just a really powerful, committed community member in our state. So thank you, and
You.
hasta luego.
Hasta pronto.